So we have a quick talk from Tristan Ross about using remote builders in Nix. Take it away.
Yeah, so in many cases, you want to be able to use a remote builder, which is basically just using SSH and having a Nix derivation build through SSH. This is very useful for if you're not wanting to use cross-compiling and want to natively compile something on ARM or x86 on a different system or a different operating system. You can use a remote build. So, hold on, there it goes. So yeah, that's one of the reasons. Another one's like lack of resources. So let's say you have just a MacBook with like 8 gigs of RAM. That's not enough to do something like build a Linux kernel. So what you can do is just tell Nix, hey, build on this Linux server that's got like 2 terabytes of RAM, and it would build it. And so the way you set it up is actually really simple, but the documentation does not make it simple. Uh, it's you have to use SSH keygen, which generates a key, and then you will just set it up like you are doing just a normal SSH setup. But then you have to copy it to root, to your root user, and from there you have to fingerprint as root to then have the IP address and all that, or the public key gets stored in the fingerprint. And so from there you can configure Nix optionally. There is a machine file that you can set up where it tells it the IP address or host name to use. You tell it the features, the architecture, and all that. Or there is the builder's flag, which works very similarly to the machine file. And so one of the things with this is there's a concept called features, which describes what exactly the system supports. So this is things like KVM, so whether or not the system has the ability to run virtual machines on the hardware. There is the NixOS test stuff, which is left over from previous Nix versions. There is this recurse Nix one where Nix itself does not allow itself to be called from within the sandbox. So recursive Nix allows you to use Nix inside of itself. CA derivations, which is content addressed derivations. That is entirely a different concept that would take too long to explain. UID range, which simply does stuff with a sandbox to allow containers. Some limitations with remote builders is SSH can disconnect if you have networking issues or just any sort of issue with the host or target system. Builders can still run out of memory. Doesn't prevent that, which makes sense. You just have to just tune the builds right using the cores or jobs, which limits how many Nix builds or builds within Nix to run. And then fingerprints have to be fingerprinted sometimes, especially with VPS services that may not store the fingerprint always. And so an easy resource to look at some of the stuff is just the Nix manual, even though it's not quite entirely clear that it does still provide information. And so I can actually possibly spin up a build here if the Wi-Fi is good enough. To actually show what the machine flag looks like. So can anyone see that well, or do I? Oh. All right. How's that? So this is what the builder's flag looks like, which is the same thing as how you would use the machine file. And what this describes is to use SSH to connect to a machine called Zeta 3A with the architecture or the platform of 64-bit ARM on Linux. Then it says that dash just means to use the default key for connecting. Then it says to do 8 cores and 8 jobs with big parallel, which is just a leftover thing to make sure that large jobs can run, and then KVM for tests, and then J0. This is actually very important because if you have an architecture that is the same, or the platform that's the same as a host, then it will mix jobs between your host system and the system that you're trying to connect to. And then when you run it, it will have to evaluate, but it will push a machine build. It does not eval on the target system. It does all the evaluations locally. So at least you can save memory on your target system if the evaluation is big. But as you can see, it's starting to pull from the cache, and then it's going to push to my system that does all the remote buildings. So any questions? So what it looks like on the target. So the configuration is pretty simple. Just enable SSH, I believe, and you have to enable trusted users, I believe, is another one. I think both, it's either the host machine that you're running the evaluation on or the target machine have to have your user as trusted to allow it, especially with substitutions. So that how to get that fancy progress? That's actually a program called Nix Output Manager or Monitor, also known as NOM. It is a very handy tool to be able to see exactly what Nix is doing, and it's available in Nix packages. So you're trying to think of how to restate this question. So you're basically asking like how to use other protocols with Nix. As far as I can tell, there is two protocols only supported in Nix at this time. SSH and SSHNG both do the same thing, but I believe one is using a different library. I'm not entirely sure. You would have to ask the Nix team, but being able to support another protocol, it's just the matter of making the changes to Nix itself and making sure that both the host and the target system can utilize that version of Nix with the specific protocol. So, uh, can you cross-compile with other architectures? Yes, it's generally the same as how you would with host. But the benefit with this is if you have a machine that is more capable than your host machine, then you are able to just natively compile for that architecture or operating system. In Nix packages, we have an easy way of being able to do cross called packages cross, and then there's various platforms in there like Arch64 multi-platform, GNU64, which is x86-64 Linux, and there's PowerPC, RISC-V, all that. You would have to look at the lib systems examples.nix file, Nix packages to look at that. But the problem with cross-compiling is that it initializes a special part of Nix packages is standard environment or standard environment that changes the base derivations. So you will not get the same exact derivations as a true native compilation. So that means it's not entirely pure because you still have host intricities in there instead of being purely native. So about sci-fi, I was gonna do that, but I just didn't get access to that system. And I was gonna do an ampere demonstration with it, but the ampere's out there and the Wi-Fi's just been flaky this morning and cellular is just not working. But this is trying to do it on my ampere at home, which may or may not work. But it does work when I try it at home.